Welcome back. I'm Joanna Kleinman, and today I want to talk about something that I believe is one of the hardest parts of being human. So, whether you're talking about growing a business, you're talking about parenting, relationships, health, money, leadership, uncertainty is one of the things that human beings struggle with the most. The not knowing if the business is going to work, not knowing if your child is going to be okay, not knowing if the opportunity will come, not knowing if people will choose you, not knowing whether the decision you're making is the right one. And as an entrepreneur myself, and as someone who coaches high achievers, executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs every single day, I can tell you this: uncertainty can feel almost intolerable because it feels like failure. It feels like losing control. And I know this because I've lived it. This is actually a pattern that I struggled with for most of my life. The difference is that for a very long time, I didn't know it was a pattern. I thought that I was simply being responsible for worrying and overthinking. And I was being driven to try to find solutions to potential problems that may happen down the road. I thought I was preparing. I thought that if I could just think about things enough and plan enough and worry enough and work hard enough, I could somehow protect myself from uncertainty. And so I spent years trying to create certainty and control, and I didn't know that I was doing that. And the way that it showed up in my life was that I was overthinking and I was over worrying and I was trying to control people and trying to control outcomes and needed reassurance. And I was constantly waiting for this feeling of peace and certainty to come. And it affected my parenting because I wanted certainty that my children would be okay. It affected my marriage. I wanted certainty about our future. It affected pretty much all of my important relationships because I wanted certainty that people wouldn't be disappointed in me or they wouldn't be upset with me. And it absolutely affected my business because I was constantly trying to predict where the next opportunity or the next client or the next level of success would come from. So for most of my life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough and thought hard enough and prepared enough, then I would arrive at this magical place where I would finally feel certain. And I eventually realized that I wasn't actually pursuing success. I was pursuing certainty. And because certainty is impossible, I was unknowingly creating a life of anxiety and unease and lack of fulfillment. So this realization changed everything. This is when I created the Mind Method, because the goal of life is not to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to become the kind of person who can lead yourself through it. That's what the Mind Method is all about, because there's no arrival point. There's no magic place where certainty is here and uncertainty disappears. In fact, as my business has grown and as I've stepped into bigger opportunities, there has actually been way more uncertainty. So a few weeks ago, I was standing in a room with a group of emerging leaders in Atlanta inside of a global consulting firm. And I remember having one of those moments where I thought, this is what I have always dreamed of For 20 years, this is what I've dreamed of, building programs for organizations and training leaders and creating something that can truly transform how people lead themselves and others. And at the exact same time, my mind was still asking, what if this doesn't last? And what if the next opportunity doesn't come? And what if I can't sustain this? And what if I'm making the wrong decisions? Because uncertainty does not disappear when you become successful. It just changes costumes. So this is the biggest reason why I created the Mind Method. It's the biggest reason why I created the Mind Method Coach Certification Program. Because people who become the most impactful people, the most impactful leaders, coaches, human beings, doesn't matter if you're becoming a coach or you're leading people in your family. The most impactful human beings are not the people who have the most certainty. They're the people who know how to navigate uncertainty. And when you can do that, you access your most powerful self. So today, I want to give you 6 shifts that completely change your relationship with uncertainty. So here's shift number 1. Uncertainty in your life is not the problem. It is the meaning that you automatically make about uncertainty. That is the issue. And most people unconsciously and automatically make uncertainty mean that something is wrong. I'm behind. I'm failing. I'm not good enough for this. I'm not capable. I should know what to do by now. Uncertainty itself is neutral. Your suffering comes from the story. It comes from the fear. It comes from all of the what if thinking. I call that future tripping. So as I lead myself through uncertainty and as I lead everybody that I work with through uncertainty, the circumstance of uncertainty is, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to go. The meaning that your mind automatically assigns is, that's bad. That's not supposed to be this way. And then the feeling that you get in your nervous system, once you assign that meaning, is fear, anxiety, urgency. And when you have those feelings, the behavior to try and overcompensate for those feelings is to overthink and overwork and control and prove yourself and strive and work yourself to the bone and maybe even overfunctioning and people pleasing. And suddenly you're exhausted. You're overwhelmed. And it's not because the circumstance you're in during this chapter in your life has to change. It's because of what your mind made the uncertainty of this chapter mean. And if you start to look, you can see the same loop of automatic thoughts, automatic feelings, automatic meaning, and automatic behavior at different times in your life when you were facing uncertainty. So that leads us to shift number 2. Your automatic mind always equates uncertainty with danger because your brain is a prediction machine. Your brain wants to know what's coming. And you truly believe if you can predict the future, that'll have you stay safe. So whenever uncertainty shows up, your inner critic self, which is really the default operating system of your mind and nervous system, it immediately gets activated. Now, for some people, that looks like perfectionism. For others, it might look like overworking. For some people, it looks like worrying. For some people, it looks like trying to control everyone around them. So when you are in that autopilot mode, you can't create your life from inspiration. Instead, you are creating your life from fear. And there is very different energy behind creating your life from inspiration versus creating your life from fear. That different energy is what changes your experience of your life. The action of creating your life could be exactly the same action, but the internal narrative changes your experience of your life. So that leads us to shift number 3. The need for certainty is often what keeps you stuck. Now, this one changed my life because the harder I tried to force outcomes, the less peace I experienced. The more attached I became to needing things to work out in a particular way, the more anxious I became. Because the attachment is what creates the pressure. And the pressure that you are under narrows your thinking. It disconnects you from creativity. It disconnects you from your deep inner wisdom. It disconnects you from being present. Now, this is why some of your best ideas have probably come when you were taking a walk in nature or in the shower or on vacation, because your nervous system finally relaxed. So I want you to imagine water flowing downstream. There's rocks and gravel and sticks and logs, and all of that represents the challenges and uncertainties of life. Now, water doesn't fight the rocks and the logs. It doesn't resist them. It doesn't try to remove them. It simply flows around them, and water keeps moving. Now, most people do the opposite. We fight the rocks and the logs. In other words, we fight reality. We resist uncertainty. We try to force life to go according to our plan. And that resistance is the very thing that exhausts us. So the most powerful people aren't the ones with fewer rocks. They're the ones who have learned to become like water. That leads us to shift number 4. Self-trust is the antidote. So a lot of people think that confidence comes from certainty. It does not. Confidence comes from trust. So the most powerful sentence you can learn to say to yourself is, I don't know what's going to happen, and I trust myself anyway. Because that is real confidence. Not, I know everything's going to work out. We don't know that everything's going to work out, and it's certainly not going to work out according to exactly how we envision it will. But I trust myself to handle whatever happens. That is true leadership. That is emotional freedom. That is a completely different experience of life. That leads us to shift number 5. You cannot access your highest self while you are in protection mode. So your authentic self is not available when your nervous system is convinced that you're under threat. When you think you are under danger, you become reactive, you have tunnel vision, you lose perspective, you stop listening to your deeper wisdom, you stop creating, you stop being the leader of your life. Now, this is why I teach people that paying attention to your well-being, that's not the reward for this work, that's the foundation. Because when the conditions that regulate our nervous system are met, that is when our highest thinking becomes available. That is when our intuition becomes available. That is when our creativity and our wisdom become available. And that leads us to shift number 6. The people who thrive are not the people who avoid uncertainty. They are the people who build capacity for uncertainty. Think about every meaningful thing in your life. Marriage, parenting, starting a business, leading people, writing a book, creating something new. Every single meaningful thing requires uncertainty. There is no extraordinary life without uncertainty. So we're never getting rid of uncertainty, no matter where we get to in our life. So the deeper question is not, how do I get rid of uncertainty? The deeper question is, who do I become inside of uncertainty? Because uncertainty is actually an invitation. It is an invitation to stop relying on control and to stop making your circumstances responsible for your peace and fulfillment. And it is an invitation to trust yourself. That's why I'm so passionate about the work of the mind method, because I know what it feels like to spend decades trying to earn certainty and trying to earn safety and peace. And after all that time, just to discover that peace is not on the other side of certainty, that peace comes from your relationship with uncertainty. So when you learn how to navigate uncertainty, you become bulletproof. You become someone who can walk into any unknown and say, I don't know how this is going to unfold, but I trust myself. I trust life. And I know that no matter what happens, I will meet it. That is the biggest freedom that there is. That's when you access your most powerful self. Because the life that you want is never going to happen if you are waiting for certainty. That life is waiting for your willingness to trust yourself in the midst of uncertainty after uncertainty after uncertainty. So thank you for tuning into today's episode. Remember, you don't need any certainty in order to feel safe and fulfilled and peaceful. You simply need to become someone who knows how to lead yourself when your life is uncertain. Thanks for tuning in today. I'll see you on the next episode.